wondered why one diet works wonders for certain people and absolutely trashes others? Or perhaps a supplement or a drug works great for your friend, maybe caffeine, yet even if you take it first thing in the morning, it keeps you up all night and just doesn't seem to be compatible with your biology. There are a ton of different lenses that you could examine this through, namely genetics, epigenetics, your constitution. But today we're talking about a concept called metabolic typing. In essence, this is the concept of bio-individuality. And if you want an excellent resource on this, I suggest you check out a book called Biochemical Individuality by Dr. Roger Williams. He breaks down the differences from one person to the next and why the customization route is really the only way to go if you want to be fully optimized. Today, we're exploring an easier way to understand this and to make actionable changes that align with your biology through a system called metabolic typing. In this episode, you'll learn the major categorizations of humans into several distinct buckets. We discuss daily health practices and routines that cater to individual metabolic types for optimal wellness. We explore Eastern medicine insights like the Ayurvedic doshas and how they align with metabolic typing. Our guest also shares how your blood type may influence what foods work best for you. Then we get into how to tailor your supplement routine accordingly based on your metabolic type, as well as some other health tools you can use to get a snapshot of your current state and to further apply metabolic typing into your life. Things like kinesio testing and the AO scan, for example. Our guest this week is Martin Pytela. He's a functional medicine expert and metabolic typing coach whose mission is to restore vitality to you and the planet. With over 12,000 clients coached since 2011 and over 60,000 students enrolled in his Udemy courses, Martin has a wealth of knowledge to share on topics such as healing trauma, managing stress and anxiety, emotions, spirituality, weight loss, metabolism, longevity, mindfulness, gut health, and overall health. You can grab the show notes for this episode at mindbodypeak.com/194. At one point in the interview, I also mentioned that taking supplements is no longer optional. If you want to understand why I say that, I will put a link to my article in the show notes for this episode. And if you want to check out our guest's work, his products, his supplements, his superfoods, you can find those on his website at life-enthusiast.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Martin, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure, really. Actually, honored. You've done a lot of good work.
Thank you. Likewise. And I'm excited today. We'll be discussing metabolic typing and some of the overlooked pillars of overall health and wellness and performance. But first, before we get started, what have you done so far for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony today?
Okay. Well, today I spent 20 minutes on my rebounder. I did a bunch of push-ups and claps and jacks, and I just finished a smoothie that was loaded with a whole lot of wonderful things. I'm actually involved in manufacturing of superfoods, so it's way up there.
What are some of the superfoods you have in your smoothie?
Okay, well, so this one had hemp seed, hemp protein, chlorella, a 250 ingredient mix called iridescent. There was some maca, blueberries, a cup of it, a spoonful of coconut oil, 2 spoonfuls of lecithin. I don't know. I'm about a third into the list. It's a busy thing.
How do you decide what you're going to have? Is it the same thing every day, or do you switch it up?
I switch it up. Well, metabolic typing. I need to eat to my type, right? My wife is very different from me. She eats very differently from myself. So for me, the best thing I can do for me is to have some carby things because they're calming to me. So when I want to just settle down and have better balance, I need to push the starchy things. So I had a whole apple in it, and anyway, it's a variety of things. let's unpack it in a longer way than just Martin's smoothie, because that really is an untypical thing.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say, because I first came across the concept of metabolic typing through a book called Biochemical Individuality. And that really elegantly portrays how we are as different on the inside as we are on the outside. And then as I came across some of the traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, they had their forms of metabolic typing 5,000 or more years ago. And it was really pivotal to the whole success of their system. And it's like, the way I describe it is we have different like archetypes, like different categories that we fall into. There's a couple of dominant ones, and certain foods will be superfoods to you, or really healthy foods to you might not be that way to me based on constitution, genetics, epigenetics, a lot of different factors. How do you describe the world of metabolic typing?
Well, so the East Indian Ayurvedic doshas, they certainly have a lot to do with it. One is calmed down by starches, the other one is stimulated by starches. One is calmed down by fats, the other one is stimulated by fats. Interestingly enough, the fellow that put this together, Bill Walcott, standing on shoulders of giants, really, right? But there are prior research that was showing that some people would be alkalized by carbohydrates and acidified by fats and proteins. And you see a lot of literature that talks about drink carrot juice and proteins will make you acidic, don't do that kind of thing. And that holds true for the group that we call autonomic dominant. But the oxidizer dominant is completely reversed. Same way as you would be left-handed or right-handed dominant, you will be, if you're oxidizer dominant, the thing is reversed. And you're acidified by carbs and alkalized by fats and proteins. I should explain what that means. When you are balanced, you have a lot of choices. When you're in the sweet spot in the middle, somewhere around 7.35, 7.45 on the pH scale. So the normal, the center for us humans, isn't at 7 at the balance point. It's slightly off to the alkaline side.
When you say that, you're talking about the overall averages throughout the body, because there's obviously certain organs that are going to be more acidic, and if they're not acidic, it's going to be unhealthy, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. We can get into that too. So the blood is maintained at around 7.35. So as you drift into alkalinity, first thing you notice is you get up later, you procrastinate, you're jovial and friendly and nice to get along with and all that. But if you keep pushing toward alkalinity, you will become hopeless or despondent, or dark moods set in, and depression lives on the alkaline side. And the acidic person will wake up early, feels like in second or third gear, just good to go right now. Lights on, doesn't dawdle at all. And then if you push in further into acidity, you start losing social graces, interrupting others, cutting in, elbows, get out of my way, cutting into traffic. And then anger kicks in. Road rage would be a fine example of fairly acidic drift. But that's externally expressed. If you turn it inward, you end up with anxiety. You will be processing your past, reliving all the things you should have done differently or shouldn't have done at all or whatever. Or you'll be catastrophizing your future, just imagining all the awful things that will happen. If, then what? Anyway, that lives on the acidic side. So you can actually swing back and forth. It depends what you do with your food. So you can actually go bipolar just by eating incorrectly. So here's what happens. If you're the oxidizer, you're made calmer by fats and proteins. If you're the fast oxidizer, you woke up early full of vim, but you'll be a jackass if you don't start pushing some fats. So you're a perfect candidate for the keto diet, like a 3-egg breakfast with a bunch of bacon on top kind of thing. Whereas if you're a slow oxidizer, you're on the other side, you're waking up alkaline, and the way to dig out of that is with starchy things. So you should give yourself a fruit salad for breakfast or something starchy to start. Otherwise, you'll never get anything done. So that's an example of that, right?
Interesting. And then there's a subset of people that are somewhere in the middle of the two, I'm guessing?
Oh, yeah, of course. So everything's a continuum, right? You can be extremely fast oxidizer, or extremely slow oxidizer, or extremely sympathetic, or extremely parasympathetic. And so this axis does well on a keto diet, and this axis does not, right? So the sympathetic and slow oxidizer make a better vegetarian, but don't do terribly well on pushing the fats. So for some of us, the keto diet is absolutely wonderful, and for some of us, it's not. Yeah, so that's the metabolic typing.
And then with that also, I mean, are these just different labels applying to the same thing? Like if I was to say a parasympathetic dominant person versus a sympathetic dominant person, is that encapsulating the same idea?
Okay, so those both of those are dominant in the regulatory or autonomic nervous system. They're called autonomics. And so one's on the acidic extreme, the other one's on the alkaline extreme. And it's like a vector, right? So for the autonomic dominant, the vector that pushes to alkalinity is carbohydrate. And the vector that pushes to acidity is fats and protein. So if you're a parasympathetic, you're waking up alkaline, and your way to get yourself less depressed, if you should be, is fats and proteins. So you're a candidate for a keto diet breakfast. If you screw up and have a couple of shots of whiskey with bananas, you're going to be so depressed you will want to take your life. So if you were to guess, Ernest Hemingway probably was a parasympathetic dominant. The more he drank, the more despondent he became until he finally ended it.
Then on the other end of the continuum, if you were the sympathetic dominant, you'd not want to start your day with the protein and fats, rather something on the carbohydrate side?
That's correct. Yeah. Fruit salad for you. Otherwise, you'll be biting people's heads off.
With the Ayurvedic system of doshas, and the Pitta is like the hot, aggressive, fiery, sympathetic dominant equivalent. And it seems it's the same there too. It's like where you want to bring your body back into balance. And if you're hot, obviously the antidote to excess heat is going to be cooling.
Yes, precisely. And then the kapha dominant will need to be fired up with some kind of a lighter fuel, right?
Does this apply to things outside of food as well? Like, for example, caffeine and coffee for the Pitta, the sympathetic dominant, it's going to add more.
So in the metabolic typing universe, as we have two layers. One answers the acid-alkaline balance, and the other one talks about the endocrine dominance, of which we have thyroid, adrenal, pituitary, and in women, also ovarian dominant. And here's the interesting thing. So the thyroid dominant, I'm an example of that, they make good sprinters, they don't make good weightlifters. On a football team, the quarterback will be a thyroid dominant and the linebacker will be adrenal dominant. The adrenal dominant ones have thick wrists, thick thighs, thick ankles. When they put on mass, it's all over. They're barrel-shaped. Whereas the thyroid type is flat-chested and skinny arms, skinny legs. And if the thyroid type gains weight, it's right on the belly and hips. So it's the apple shape. And then the pituitary dominant, they put on weight blubbery, like doughboy, Pillsbury doughboy, Cabbage Patch doll. The ankles are as fat as the knee as the thigh. They're less common, but you find them. And then in women can get their ovaries stimulated by hot food, as in like hot Thai or hot Indian or hot something food. And that pushes estrogen and that accentuates the secondary characteristics. So bigger hips, bigger tush, all of that. It's the Kardashian model of life.
So if you have one of those dominances, say you have pituitary dominance, are you going to see increased activity in that gland? Like if I measure their growth hormone, am I going to see more? Or if I measure the thyroid hormone levels in someone who's thyroid dominant, am I going to see like increased, like perhaps even out of range markers? Or is it kind of just like a looser characteristic?
The one I'm really familiar with is the thyroid, because I'm that. And my thyroid is challenged. So I have to push iodine. I have to really be careful with with purine, with red meats. For example, the thyroid dominant people do well on white meats like turkey, chicken, fish, that sort of thing. Not sardine and not bison. Like if I overdo, and I did, if I overdo red meat, I get me gout. So thyroid types don't like a lot of that. Whereas for the pituitary dominant, the organ meats, heart, tongue, liver, all of that, are the health food. That's their home base. Whereas they'll be tempted by creamy, fluffy things like ice cream and whipping cream and that sort of thing. The thyroid, like me, we're tempted by starchy things like cakes and donuts and cookies and potato chips and popcorn, all the carb stuff. But that's exactly how we gain weight. So I have to keep very narrow band. See, like I was mentioning in our earlier talk, I can be happy on carbs, very calm, very balanced, but I'll be gaining weight. So I have to moderate my carb intake to the level where I'm not a jackass, but not so much that I put on weight. So for me, the weight loss diet would be keto. But if I overdo it, personally, I'd be miserable. So if we, the adrenal dominant, those people are tempted by savory foods and they gain weight with fat. So you put somebody who's the adrenal type on a keto diet, he'll be actually putting on weight. Weight loss diet for them is salads, fruit salads, and stuff like that.
So when you say you're taking iodine, it sounds like your thyroid levels would not be out of the reference range high necessarily. Perhaps it's just they're under the reference range. And so you're doing things to bring your thyroid back into optimal levels.
Yeah, I need support.
Gotcha.
But I don't know enough to answer it for everybody.
Yeah. Those are the areas potentially of the body that need extra attention. And you want to bring those back into balance however you can in a healthy way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can find health. And it's the biological individuality. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then how would you see this show up on your genetics? Would you see like when I look at my genetics, I do, according to the reports, really well with higher carbohydrates than usual. And I don't know if that's because I'm like the fiery type that needs that extra carbohydrate to pacify, to bring it back into balance.
All right. Well, you look thyroid type, I think, by the part of you that I see. Well, there's more to it, right? I would have to. Can you put your fingers around your wrist? Can you wrap your hand around your wrist? Is the question. Easily, right? Almost easily.
Barely. Yeah.
You're thyroid type with some adrenal. Plus, of course, you've been working out, so you're a little.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Does that change? Because when I was younger, I used to be definitely the sprinter type where I could not put on weight. I tried really hard, ate a ton, ate way more than my friends, had the mass gaining shakes and everything. And I feel like I've changed over time. I'm much more broad and filled out than I was back then.
I would say that the thyroid type will have a hard time putting on muscle and the adrenal will have a very easy time putting on muscle. So,
but does it change though? Can you go from a thyroid type when you're younger to an adrenal type when you're older?
It's genetic. It shouldn't shift a whole lot. Well, there are variances, right? Like your epigenetics are shifting. You're messing around with your regulators and who knows what else. So you're now doing all the things that would make you look like Atlas as opposed to a willow twig, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So there's one more thing to be said, and that's the blood type, right? The blood type O, A, B, and AB. And what you have there is that the blood type O's are the original hunters. So they have a much easier time with the hunter diet, whereas they do terribly on grains and dairy. That's just no for them. The A's are the farmers. They make much better vegetarians, if anything. The B's are interesting. They're from around the Mediterranean, and they do terribly on pork and shrimp. So it made it all the way into the Old Testament, where they are saying, do not eat pork and do not eat bottom feeder fish. That's specifically written for the blood type Bs.
Interesting. Yeah. Is there any validation into this? Like, have there been any larger scale studies into like, okay, this blood type does better with this type of diet or avoiding these types of foods?
Oh yeah, gosh, yeah. Yeah, there's even an app. You can go look it up. Eat Right for Your Blood Type by Diademo. You can download it in your phone and just see what you do when you eat against your type as opposed to with your type. Like I can promise you, for example, myself, if I eat lamb or beef or something like that, I'll be sleeping through the night, no problem. If I eat chicken, I can promise you that there's enough histamine that I'll have to get up to go pee in the middle of the night. There's definitely something to be said on that.
What's really interesting about all this too is that like, yeah, there might be a lot of evidence, like anecdotal evidence that people are getting good results from doing these things. We might not necessarily know it's the histamine that's causing the issue with certain people, but then eventually in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the science comes around and elucidates the exact mechanisms that are causing this.
Yeah, well, I catch people when they are calling for help. So this is now stiffness on rising. My level of inflammation has reached to the point where it takes me 5 steps when I stand up from my armchair to straighten out fully, right? I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the clients who are eating against their type, and they are inflamed just enough that they are still operating, but not well. This book, you can pick it up anywhere you want. Eat Right for Your Blood Type, Peter Diademo. And so when you open it, it says, okay, what do you want to eat today? So if you are blood type B, highly beneficial vegetables will include beets, broccoli, cabbage, kale, peppers, greens, jalapenos. And the avoid would be artichoke, avocado, corn, olives. I'm AB. I'm on both. Don't eat A, don't eat B.
Is that how it works? So if you're both, then you follow. So like the things that you should eat, you can eat either of those or only the things that appear on both lists?
Yeah, this thing only answers what doesn't do well. I know what my worst choices are. There are so many times when I say, and eat it anyway. I just read that olives are not great for me. Well, could be. I mean, I consume a lot of olive oil. So there are definitely ways to figure it out, right? And if you have a guide, you can start paying attention.
One of the things I notice is that people have a hard time knowing what foods they do well with and what they don't do well with. And once you become more sensitive to the changes going on inside your body, it becomes easier just to know, okay, that food did not sit well with me. But sometimes, especially when you're getting started, it's really difficult to do that. How do you recommend people determine if foods are doing well in their unique body? Are there any symptoms you look for?
One of the quick ways would be the heart rate reaction, right? So you sit yourself down at your table and you check your heart rate. So let's just say your resting heart rate is 72 or some number like that. Then you're going to pick onions, put it in your mouth, and 30 seconds later, check your heart rate. If it jumps up a whole bunch, your body's getting somewhat excited about it. Not in a good way. Right?
A whole bunch being like 10 beats per minute, 40 beats per minute?
10. Yeah.
10, okay.
No, 10. 10's enough to indicate.
And if a food is compatible with you, would you see the heart rate decrease or would it just stay the same?
No. The decrease would be that it's depressing, right? So there may be foods that are actually pulling you down. I don't know if this is 100%. I mean, my number one thing is muscle testing. I go with that all the time. To demonstrate, this would be a quick little loop between your thumb and your pinky, and then you just test the resistance. And on a truthful statement, my name is Martin, it holds. My name is Charlie, it doesn't hold, right? And so cucumber is great for me. For me, yes. Bell pepper is great for me. No, right? And I am sensitive to all the nightshades, so I can have potatoes once a week. Twice a week I herd. 3 times a week I hobble.
Anyone who wants to explore that topic deeper, they can look up muscle testing or kinesio testing or duckbill testing on YouTube and figure out how exactly it works. As I recall, I think it's working with your subconscious where you've not infinitely, but close to infinitely more information and processing power than you do in your conscious mind.
Actually, you're connecting to the universal field of potentiality or the universal field of consciousness out there. So you can ask anything. Like I amuse myself by watching the news on TV and saying, this man is lying. This man knows he's lying. This man doesn't know he's lying. It's really interesting because sometimes you have these people who are telling lies, but they just believe them. It's wise for me to stay living in the town I'm in, or it's wise for me to move to Texas, or whatever you want to say, right? Like the universal field of consciousness will provide you the answer.
Are there things that obstruct that? Like I'm wearing a smart watch, the Bluetooth is off, it's in airplane mode, but I'd assume that there's still some kind of electrical current that's going to disrupt that micro current of electricity.
Yeah, probably.
So you want to take it off first?
Perhaps, I don't know. Maybe when it's on always, you will still get the answer consistently because you're consistently affected. Right? I use something called AO Scan, which is another remote management system. It's downloadable into the phone. And you can talk to it, ask it to scan you.
I'm curious about that really quickly. What technology is that using? AO Scan?
Yeah, AO Scan company is called Solex, Solex. And it's based on some old Russian stuff that they developed when they needed to communicate with people up there in the space station. What they needed to do is be able to scan them and know how they are doing. It's a stimulus and response system. They send you a digital stimulus and then listen to how your body's responding to it. And so they can send me digital onion, right? And my body responds to it with I like, I don't like. And it up-regulates you into inflammatory or down-regulates you into suppressed. And so what you want is you want the middle. And you don't want to be over or under-energized on your meridians, your chakras, your organs.
Energy centers, whatever you want to call them, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's a high-tech secret technology developed by the Russians that is approximating or perhaps more precisely giving the same or similar results as muscle testing.
Uh-huh. You know, a good traditional Chinese practitioner who knows how to do pulses will have the same set of data, but it's a bloody effort to learn it, right? Whereas here, I just pay them $150 a month for infinite number of tests, and I can test me, my body, and my dog, and my horse, all of them.
It's cool. There's multiple different avenues here. Back to the metabolic typing, though, because that's what I want to focus on. There's a lot of factors that go into this. How do you know that when you're working with someone, or if someone is looking into their metabolic type, that they get it right? Because you mentioned you have to figure out whether you're parasympathetic or sympathetic. I think you called it acid or alkaline dominant. And then also like what type you are, like what organ type, like adrenal or thyroid or pituitary. And then there's one other one that I'm forgetting now.
So we have this thing called DCR, Daily Check Record, and it's a piece of paper. We have breakfast, lunch, dinner on it. Oh, here's an interesting sidebar. So the thyroid types like to eat 3 meals about equal size, breakfast, lunch, dinner. The adrenal types don't like eating breakfasts. They go with a cup of coffee, light lunch, big dinner. The pituitary are the other way. They love big breakfast, not so much lunch, and 0 dinner. So there you have it, right? Each one of us different. Now, you can be also not extreme thyroid, right? Like you could be somewhere halfway between thyroid and adrenal or have characteristics of both. Remember, it's like a flat space and you're somewhere on the map, right? Somewhere on this page. So depends which corner you get. The more closer to center you are, the more flexible you are.
Yeah. Do you know the distribution of how many people fall into each? Because a lot of the way the current research works is it just lumps everyone into one group. And then it's like, is this significant on the average of all those people, even though it's quite possible that not a single person in that entire study was actually average. They're all either above or below the trend line in some way.
Yeah, I tell people if I were average, I'd have 1 testicle, 1 ovary, 1 eye blue, and 1 eye brown. I call it the fallacy of the scientific method. The double-blind study is so blind you could just cry for the following reason. The results of the study are dependent on the statistical distribution of the metabolic types that were participating in that study. If you got all adrenal types, you will now have a uniform drift into the adrenal type, right? But, for example, if we were all parasympathetic, we would need more fat, more protein, more magnesium. We would probably do better if we could have more vitamin B5, and our vitamin B3 would have to be niacinamide to make it match. For example, right? Like there are all these different, like we have a ton of details about all of this, which vitamin, which amino acid, and so on, depending on your type. So, but you asked me something different that should get answered.
How much of the population falls into each?
Oh yeah, the distribution. Yeah. Well, every Victoria's Secret model is a thyroid type. The adrenal types are built like a German farmer who can take a pitchfork and throw hay up on the loft, right? So gymnasts like Simone Biles or Shawn Johnson, they are definitely adrenal types, or at least more in the adrenal dominance. Like Tina Turner was probably halfway between thyroid and adrenal, more of the adrenal. The statistical distribution. I would say that the pituitary is not common. The adrenal is probably more predominant than not. Well, here's this. So the thyroid types are dependent on coastal foods, right? They love seaweed and fish and that sort of thing. So Swedes, Norwegians, Danes, Irish, British Isles, good ratio, right? So America has this slant toward the thyroid because of the immigration pattern. I don't know, if you're an African or have African heritage, think about what they ate in Equatorial Africa, right? Lots of coconut oil, tropical fish, shorebirds, eggs, bushmeat. No mention of corn or fried chicken or any of that. It's just an abomination, really. Right?
One thing I've always wondered about these types of thing, and it wasn't really a problem back then when the early systems of metabolic typing like Ayurveda were developed, was the mismatch between ancestry, say you're from the equator, and then current living, because you might have that ancestry, but you might live way up in Alaska or somewhere where it is a totally different climate and the same foods are going to be out of season and everything.
Yeah, there was an awesome study done by Weston O. Price back in 1930s. And Price Foundation to this day is promoting ancestral living, and they know what they're doing. But here's what he found. He went to Maasai in Africa, and he went to Tonga, and he went to Switzerland, and 11 different places. Every one of them, he said, so long as the person ate their ancestral diet, they did fine. When they started eating the modern industrial diet, they did badly. So, well, let me try this. So a boy is born, the year is 1200 AD in Switzerland. He's going to, after he's weaned, going to be eating aged cheese, rye bread, sauerkraut. On Sundays, they'll kill the chicken. In February, when it's cold enough, they'll butcher the pig. That's the Swiss boy, right? Now, somewhere in Norway, 60 degrees north, the growing season is 90 days long. So they will be eating dried codfish, salmon, maybe some reindeer meat. They'll be very strongly keto diet for sure. Let's pick another one. North Africa, Bedouin, oasis, dates, figs, pomegranates, camel milk, carb, 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 carb. Right? So if you take the Bedouin and ship him to Norway, he's going to wither. He's going to be sick in 2-3 years. Right? The boy that was growing up in Switzerland, if he's mismatched genetically, by the time he's 10 years old, he probably will succumb to some illness that runs through the village. I don't think it will take too many generations to sort out the genetics straight for the food resource that's intensely local. So now you introduce travel and ship everybody to America, and they start mating, right? So you have now your Cherokee grandmother mating with your Norwegian grandfather, with your Bedouin cousin, I don't know, just, people mixing it in. So it's complicated now. The uniformity is gone.
If say you were born in the equator and you moved up to somewhere that's an intensely cold area, let's go back to the Alaska example, would you be consuming foods that are shipped in from the equator and be getting more of those tropical fruits and everything, even though it's perhaps the winter and really cold in Alaska?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that gets hard because, of course, we need to eat with the season, right? So if I move to Florida, I will be pushing citrus and banana. And if I move to Norway, I will be pushing fat because otherwise I'll be just shivering cold. Right? Like I can't get enough energy out of oranges to keep warm in cold of the winter. It's complicated.
Yeah, I could also see a hybrid approach too, where it's like, yes, you can eat whatever foods are closest to where you're from, where your ancestors came from. And you can also adapt and add in some of the local foods for sustenance and to keep you alive at the same time.
Right. Yeah, you need to eat with the weather. So push more fats when it's cold and push more fruit when it's not.
And it might just be more fats, but it still might be less fats than someone else if you're not that type, and then vice versa.
Yes. Oh, definitely that. So we started talking about the DCR. So we have this sheet, and on that sheet we have this: describe your breakfast, show me how much fat, protein, and carb you have on it. And then 90 minutes after you eat, when the digestion has kicked off, answer some questions. Am I already satiated, or am I still hungry? Am I already craving something? Or mentally, am I alert, or am I dopey? Or am I overstimulated and just something like that, right? So when you over-alkalize, you start going into the depression and unable to think clearly. And when you over-acidify, you become hyper something, like people who are known as ADD, hyper something, they're usually just living in the acidic environment within, internally.
Yeah. What about the practices that we can do that alter the acidity or alkalinity, that balance? For example, I can use breath work and I can change the pH of my blood relatively quickly.
Yes. Yeah. I wish they were teaching breath work at school, right? I mean, if you need to kick in the autonomic nervous system, slow yourself down, all you have to do is just roll your tongue, press it up against the roof of your mouth, and breathe deeply. And your panic will pass in, 10 breaths, right? Like there are so many wonderful techniques that we can deploy to regulate the autonomic nervous system. But the autonomic nervous system is definitely pushed around with your food choices. So you can override it with your practice, but you can make your life easier by knowing what's coming. So here's what you do. 2 tests. Test 1, carbo push. Okay, let's go to a Christmas party where cookies and alcohol is served. Right? Drink 1, the alkaline people, the ones that are alkalized by alcohol, the autonomic dominants. First drink, they are very bubbly, jovial, talking. Second drink, they are oversharing. They're releasing personal details that they wish they didn't. Third drink, they start crying, just emotionally blowing it. Fourth drink, they're falling asleep. Now, in the oxidizer group, we have drink 1, louder, just louder, more into it. Drink 2, argumentative. Drink 3, hostile. Drink 4, punching each other out. That's how she goes. So next time you're at a party where a whole lot of carbs are consumed, just watch what happens. You can sort people out just like that.
Interesting.
So that's test 1. Find out if carbs make you alkaline or acidic. Test 2. Do something very rich in fat and protein. So, bacon and eggs, straight up. That will be fat and protein push. It should be 180 opposite to what the carbs did. So if you are oxidizer, fats are calming. If you're autonomic, fats are stimulating. That's it. Once you know, you know.
What about the role of circadian rhythm and timing? Like if I eat that fat and protein early in the morning, it's going to be a different effect because of the cortisol levels and the other glucagon, different things going on in my body than it would be at night, for example.
The thyroid types will want to have a breakfast, mild, moderate, The adrenal types will want to skip it, and the pituitary will want to have a double serving. Okay, so if you are into really optimizing it, then you would want to have no interruption to your elimination cycle. So you want to have only fruit until noon. You know, the elimination cycle is interrupted when you start eating foods like proteins. So if you eat them early in the day, then you're shutting down the elimination part. So you want to do at least 1, if not 2 days a week when you don't do it.
When you say the elimination, okay, you're talking about autophagy, like the cellular cleanup, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, allow the autophagy to kick in.
Well, that's carbohydrates as well, though. Protein or carbohydrates.
All of it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Take a break, right? Give your body a chance to dig into your fat reserves. That does not usually happen until you are essentially kicking the starvation mode.
So then for something like fasting and say intermittent fasting, the pituitary type is going to be the least likely to want to do that. Is that going to be the most effective for them, or is that going to not be productive?
Well, no, they'll eat a breakfast and then they will be happy to not eat until the next breakfast. It's just a different time of day.
Gotcha. But it seems from my real world observation that a lot of people are very resistant to fasting. Some are never even consider it, go two hours without eating. Perhaps it's metabolic inflexibility. Perhaps it's their type, whatever. Other people.
Seriously, 2 hours?
2, 3, 4 hours. Like the point is they eat constantly, very frequently. And other people, they have to remember and like set an alarm to eat. It's the exact opposite. Would that be governed by metabolic type?
Probably. I would imagine so. There's so much variability, right? Some people are very easily affected by the balances of the foods, like unstable. Like it will take a tablespoon of carbohydrates to push you from one side to the other. Whereas others, they are like the sumo wrestler. There's no way you can knock them out of balance. There are people who tell me, I have no idea, food doesn't affect me. I can eat anything. So then we have to try and dig to get it right. Whereas others, they're princess and the peas kind of situation where they know exactly how quickly they get affected by the change.
Part of that's determined by overall level of health, because back when I was like in my drinking days, I could pound 4 drinks at once and have no problem. Didn't really think that food affected me in any way. Then I took a step back, and as I got healthier, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can see how this food affects me. But for majority of my life, I had no idea that food had any impact on me.
Yeah, the vibrational quality of your body improved. I'm thinking like this, right? Like if you throw a large boulder in the middle of a cow path that's traveling at 4 miles an hour, it's no big deal. You walk around it. If you throw the same boulder into the middle of the freeway traveling at 60 miles an hour, you now have a serious issue because now you're avoiding and you're causing trouble. So I'm thinking that once you cleaned up, you get the freeway effect. Your body's vibrating at a better rate, and throwing a boulder into it is an event, whereas before, nothing.
Yeah. I think also that people who can't get any effect out of muscle testing, it's for a similar reason. Like a lot of times once I've seen them clean up their diet, do some like actual effective detox strategies, they come back to it 6 months later, and all of a sudden they actually feel a sensational difference in their body as they're using these tools, and no longer seems like complete BS, because that's what everyone thinks, myself included. When I first came across it, I'm like, come on, that's ridiculous. But then the real life experience shows otherwise. Yeah,
10 years later, you're now much more with it, right? Yeah, I think you're right with that, is that the ability to, personal awareness, right? Just becoming more attuned to everything.
Because part of it is also like you have the signal and the noise, and you want that the goal is to get a large signal and minimize the amount of noise, kind of like the static on the radio. And when you detoxify, you're increasing the signal and most importantly, decreasing that noise so that all of a sudden the audio becomes a lot more clear.
Yeah, that is an excellent metaphor or excellent way of representing it. Because I'm thinking, if I throw something that vibrates at a 100 into something that vibrates at 20, it's going to be a life-changing event. If I throw that 100 into something that vibrates at 85, it's a nice. The gains are the greatest. I think it's logarithmic when you are really polluted and know nothing. even small changes are very noticeable.
Is there a quick and dirty means of evaluating supplementation? Like there's so many cool supplements out there. A lot of them aren't effective or they're not effective for certain people. Is there a way of bringing this methodology and perspective to supplements specifically?
Yeah, it will probably take hiring the coach and doing the plan. I have the binder right up there on the wall and I can open it there and I just say, okay, these aminos, more of that, these vitamins, more of that, and so on. So I would be able to fine tune a plan for you with the understanding of what your type is. And then we would just build it and keep fine tuning with the program, right? With the daily check record I did this and I did better. My mental state, my emotional state, my physical state were all closer to balanced. I keep talking about four things. I keep waving my four fingers, which is this: toxicity, malnutrition, stagnation, and trauma.
Those are your drivers of disease, correct?
Yeah, the four legs on which disease will stand, right? If you have toxicity, it's going to never allow you to build health. And it probably is the first one that you should address. And malnutrition, that's stuff that you should be getting and aren't. And it's so easy these days because our food is so depleted because of the fields being so overused and all of that. So you need to, these days, supplementation is not optional. It's, if you want health, you need to get that.
Before you even go on to that, malnutrition to me, it's like, first of all, I totally agree with you. Supplementation is no longer optional. Actually, I wrote an article on that recently. I'll put that in the show notes for this because I said that exact same thing. But also it's like, there's certain things that we're not getting, a lot of things we're not getting from the food supply. But then depending on the way of eating and like the diet and everything, there'll be certain things that we're getting way in excess. And that's part of it too. You can have toxicity from insufficiency or toxicity from excess.
Oh dear. You're a walking philosopher. I like this. So we have, of course, two approaches to life: subtractive and additive. Oftentimes we need to add in what we're missing, but so many times we actually need to just take less of something. Food as we know it right now is too rich in calories and too poor in nutrients. There even is a Congress report that shows that the mineral density of our foods is down about 90%, or it's 10% of what it was 150 years ago, which is horrendous. Like imagine that the minerals you get in 10 pounds of broccoli equals what your grandmother got in 1 pound. That's unattainable, right? Like you cannot eat enough food to feed your body well without blowing yourself up into 360 pounds. That's the problem we're having right now, is that the body says, feed me. It doesn't say calories. It says, feed me nutrients. And you give it pizza. Okay, so subtractive, right? Do less of the wrong stuff. And additive, do more of the right stuff. So supplementation, you need to now get nutrient-dense foods. And there are many bits you need to know about. Macronutrients, minor nutrients, trace minerals, and then the regulators, all the, peptides. We can get into all the fine stuff. But number one, make sure that you balance your fats, proteins, and carbs. Those are the big killers, the big rocks in the solution. Get that right first. Then get the minerals right. Then get the vitamins right. Then get the aminos right. Then get the peptides right. Sometimes I tell people you're majoring in minor things, right? Like they call me up and said, does berberine fix me? And I'm saying, well, yeah, it helps with the carbohydrate metabolism, sure. But maybe you should evaluate your dinner.
Exactly. I agree with you. Where does calories sit on your list, if anywhere?
Well, it's energy, right? If you consistently eat more calories than what you're putting out, you're going to store it as energy, which is fat.
All else equal, yeah.
Some people, well, the thyroid types, when they're young, they're just awesome at burning off energy. Like they can eat anything. And then past middle age, that goes away and they start putting on weight. It's hormonal, right? Like enzyme reserve. And there's so many issues, right? When you're 27, you have probably finished your enzyme reserve that you were born with. So if you're not supplementing both systemic and digestive enzyme into your 30s, 40s, and on, you're going to decline, right? I cannot tell you whether aging is loss of enzymes or loss of enzyme causes aging. Which is it? So you eat enzymes as an old man and you'll feel youngish. You might not look like this, right? Like I remember myself looking like you when I was in my 30s, perhaps even 40s. But I remember at 46, my hair started to go gray, and it just caught up with me somehow.
Yeah. All right. You've mentioned, I think, 2 of your 4 drivers of disease. What were the other 2?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, stagnation, right?
Stagnation.
Your immune system, no, not immune, lymphatic, right? Your lymphatic system is dependent on you moving against gravity. So walking is better than bicycling, because with bicycling, you're sitting and you're only moving your knees. When you're walking, you're actually moving the center of gravity up, down with each step, which is what will cause the movement of the lymphatic fluid, pumping it up from your legs all the way up to here. This is right here is where the lymphatics connect into the bloodstream, and then it gets filtered. Anyway, you need that, otherwise you stagnate. The sure sign of knowing that your lymphatics are stagnant is when your armpits and your crotch and your feet start smelling. That's the gravity points.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what are some of the practices you like for helping alleviate stagnation? You mentioned one to start the show off, which is rebounding, aka bouncing on a mini trampoline. Are there any other techniques, tools, practices you like?
Yeah, dry skin brushing is awesome, even with just a towel. But if you can get a brush, all the better. And you brush from the extremities towards the center, from ankles up towards the pelvis, from pelvis up to the chest, and so on. Just drag it up to these points. That's where you want them. So when you do this brushing, you're helping the lymphatic system to move along. Oh, you can start doing the pumping, right? Like this, there are these glands here, so you can pump them, and then these, and then these, and then these, and so on, right? Now you can stimulate the lymphatic system to start moving things along. Stagnation is a bad idea because it's like a swamp, right? Putrefying.
Yeah, and you can use, like you were saying, acupressure, like self-massage, or even external massage from professional to help with that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely that, yeah.
Do you ever use whole body vibration systems?
Oh, that's a nice thought. Yeah, I don't love gadgets, but for anyone who is in a wheelchair or in a bed or whatever, they should be vibrated for sure. So anyone who's having hard time with bouncing on their own, yeah, absolutely. Just make sure that you set the vibration to low rate, like 5 or 6 cycles per second rather than 20. Because when you do the fast one, you're causing, you're stimulating but not moving the lymph. Because it's what in the lymphatic system, you have these channels, and in the channel there's a flap. And so when the body moves down, the fluid stays up while the flap is open. And then on the other side, the flap closes and the body moves up. And so this is like, well, anyway, the flaps can't move fast enough to the 20 beats per second.
Okay, that's stagnation. There's a fourth. Traumatic
Events. All of us pick up stuff along the way. Our subconscious, until we're 6 years old, there's no gates. There's nobody monitoring what goes in. So you pick up all kinds of stuff as an infant and child. But still, even other events will program you, especially traumatic stuff, whether it's, the worst examples are like a child growing up in an alcoholic's family, or somebody getting raped, or watching murders, or first responders or soldiers, or you name it, stuff that just horrible things, right? Anyway, it will affect you and it will program your body in some way. But an example would be something like this. A 3-year-old child is asking, "Mommy, give me the lollipop. My sister has already got one." And mother says, "Darling, your sister has finished her dinner. As soon as you finish your dinner, I will give you your lollipop." And the 3-year-old stores in her head, I'm unlovable and unworthy. Nobody gives me what I want. Now she's 30 years old, applying for a job somewhere on the Wall Street or whatever, and she's sabotaging it because she's unlovable and can't get what she deserves, right? So that stuff should be unprogrammed, and there are wonderful techniques. And some of these things are physical, some of these are mental and emotional and whatever. All of this responds well to things like neuro-linguistic programming, body talk, quantum healing, EFT, emotion freedom technique, also known as tapping. All of these things reach inside your body without necessarily dredging out the content. You just release it. It's sort of like, I have a balloon here, I need to prick it, I don't care what's in it. And so this thing, whatever the blockage is, whether it's your father issue, mother issue, brother issue, I don't know, don't care, don't need to know. If you're envious, the envy can be released and you stop being envious. It's workable. And then we need to go back to the daily practices, right? So combine your meals correctly, choose your foods well, never ever put in your mouth refined flour, sugar, salt, refined seed oils, and commercial dairy. Never ever do that. What else should we tell people? Keep a gratitude practice, right? All things good that will ever happen to you travel on the vibration of gratitude. And the opposite of that is the vibration of grievance or complaint or unforgiveness. So if ever you want to get cancer, be very envious and unforgiving. It's a sure bet.
Well, we've given people a lot of things to look into and ponder today, Martin.
Yeah, the metabolic typing is great because it's the bedrock of it all, right? Like you can really make a huge leap forward in your mental health, emotional health, and even physical health when you understand how it works and why it works.
Yeah, exactly. The human body is a cybernetic system, a system of systems. When you work on any of these planes, the physical plane, the mental plane, or the emotional plane, it tends to improve the others as well. So start with metabolic typing, try some of the things we discussed here today, and let us know how it goes. You can reach me on Instagram at Mind Body Peak Performance. Martin, I'm curious if there was a worldwide burning of the books and all knowledge on earth was lost, but you get to save the works of 3 teachers, who you'd choose and why.
Well, this is horrendously that bad. Okay. I like A Course in Miracles. I would like that to survive. Oh, there. Lao Tzu. Tao Te Ching, whatever, how it's pronounced, I don't know. The Book of Tao. Bhagavad Gita. Probably, I don't know. I would like the Bible to go back to the original. But yeah, those are the works that should survive. If I were to pick any one modern author, I'd pick Robert Heinlein. He's my favorite philosopher. He masqueraded as a science fiction writer, but he really was a philosopher.
For the world of nutrition, you mentioned Weston A. Price earlier. Would you keep his works or someone else's?
Oh, man. Well, this Bill Walcott, the writings that he made or put out are worth having. Yeah, Weston O. Price is an awesome mission. But, you can't put it in one book. They have a website with thousands of posts, Biohacking, there is a whole bunch. Self-hacking, do you remember? That's Joel Cohen or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Self-decode, yeah. And self-hacked before self-decode, yeah.
That's one. Sayer G is awesome.
Yeah.
He's put together some phenomenal work. Right? But I mean, again, right there, that's the entire library of all things, right?
Yeah. Cool. Well, we have lots for the show notes. Martin, if people want to connect with you, to follow your work, to check out your superfoods, or to work with you, how do they find you?
Our website is Life Enthusiast, and it's written with a dash in between, life-enthusiast.com. The brand we make is called Exula, EXSULA. And we have a whole bunch of other products there, because food is not the only thing. And we have we have channels, LIFENTCO on YouTube and Telegram and X.
Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been fun talking all things metabolic typing and so much more with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.